Welcome to Salsido Paranormal. I'm your host, James Salsido, and tonight we are going to finish my series on mythology and the paranormal. As always, you can find all episodes of the show to media, ways to listen, and ways to support the show at the website, and that is salsidoparanormal.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.com. And support is never expected but always appreciated, as there are expenses in making these shows. And there are many ways to support the show. You can share the show with others and rate and review it on your favorite podcast platform. You can sign up for the Patreon feed and get all the extra content there for as little as $1 a month. You can also check out the merchandise store and get some uh, shirts, all different kinds of shirts and some other items with designs made by friends of the show. Please follow friends of the show, and that would be Jen, the Arcane Observer, who we'll be talking to in a little bit here, who has her own channel and is the co-host of this show on Saturdays when she's able to make it. Also, Ricky of the Anything Is Possible podcast, as I join him on Sundays to talk all things paranormal. And Michael Strange, host of Trouble Minds Radio, which I call into frequently, and the Trouble Minds Radio Network, KUAP Digital Broadcasting, where you can hear all kinds of amazing shows, as well as my own, online 24/7 for free. And I think that takes care of all that. So a while ago, I wanted to look into just parallels between mythology around the world and modern reports of paranormal events. And we've done a couple episodes in this series, and this will be the last one, at least for this version of this series. I'm sure this is something that we'll come back to here and there over the years, but it's been a lot of fun so far, and I have half a dozen more bullet points to go over here. But I think this is a good point to say hello. Jen, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, it's good to be here, and I'm looking forward to the show and hearing all the different stories you have, and just kind of seeing where we go with it.
Yeah, so I have 6 bullet points here. I'll read them over each one at a time, and we'll talk about the all the stuff that we can think of to go with it.
Awesome.
So
That sounds good. I'll mute up for a
okay,
minute.
sounds good. So getting back to this list, and I used a particular AI because it has sources, it gives sources and everything. So I think it's important. And but anyway, it's been good. It's been good so far. And let's see here. Let me get to the next bullet point here. And thank you all for being here. I see you all in the chat. I appreciate you coming over to listen live, and thank you all who listen to the podcast as well. So the next point on this list, this is a whole breakdown of basically mythology and the paranormal and the parallels between the two. So this next bullet point here is sentient nature and animism. The ancient belief system of animism, that nature possesses inherent consciousness and soul, underlies mythologies from indigenous cultures to ancient civilizations. Modern paranormal experiences often report conscious interaction with environmental energies or nature-based entities, reflecting this same worldview. And I'm thinking about just reports of people getting sort of a feeling from just their environment, not even necessarily um, one object, but just the world around them, or the forest, or just different things, and how much of that is similar to what this is referring to here. But and just the idea of the land having its own energy and its own type of, I don't know if it's consciousness or not, but when there's no obvious other manifestations except you're getting a feeling of being there being a presence that you're in the middle of. I think is a fascinating thing when I've heard it reported before. And sometimes there are other entities associated with that. When it comes to being in the forest, people will see little small figures moving around. Other times it'll be animals or what looks like animals, or even the trees moving. I've heard of rare cases of that happening too. But yeah, whatever your thoughts are on that, Jenna, because I'm not sure I have many so far.
I mean, that basically is my whole view of reality. Like
Mm.
that's where I'm at in my mind with things, is that the consciousness of nature and animals individually, that they have their own type of intelligence. It's not a human intelligence, but it's a type of intelligence, and um, it's the way that, in my mind, it's the clearest way to see the world. I think we just removed ourselves from it by believing that we were the only thing that had any type of worthwhile consciousness. That to imagine that the animals or that microorganisms or that birds or that spaces or that things in nature are thinking at some, and not the way that we think of thinking, and not like human thinking, but that they are aware of the environment, that they are interacting with the environment, that they have that sort of consciousness of their existence. There's a way of living for them that's that creates a type of awareness of a type of worldview. It's hard to say because it's not a human perspective per se, but they certainly, I believe that they do, and I think that that is it's been removed in the process of elevating humanity to position up out of it, and I think that that's a mistake in some regards. But personally, that kind of concept you just described is exactly kind of my world view. So I think it's a very fascinating way to look at things, and it's actually a huge. Um, I guess it's full of all kinds of things we could think about and talk about as far as like what that could mean. But and then that even the world of we talk a lot about spirits and ghosts and things like that. And I've mentioned before that I kind of believe that, well, I firmly believe that that's all here in this world, that it's not necessarily in some other realm, that it's all happening right here in this world that we're living in. But that it is, so I guess animism, that's exactly the way that I see things, and that's how I like to interpret things.
Yeah, it makes me think too, since we are so far removed from it, I wonder if some people, when they get out into away from civilization and they have weird experiences, I've heard of people refer to seeing things and almost people referring them to being alien-like, when it's not. It's only alien compared to human, but it's not really alien as in a space alien. It's just different or unfamiliar. So I could see that when it comes to people having encounters with presences that are um, just going about their business, not really, as we've talked about before in previous episodes in the series, not really good, not really bad, because those are human concepts. Um, but just going about its business, and sometimes people end up wandering into places where they're sort of in the way of the business of whatever's going on and having these experiences that they can't explain. So, yeah, that makes sense to me as well.
Yeah, I mean, we can understand. I mean, I think that we could. I just think
Hmm.
that right now, as a species, we don't, for the most part. Like we've completely extracted ourselves away from it in a way, but there's a new environment we're working with, and so I think that that also has some type of awareness to it. I don't know what kind or how you would define it, but alien intelligence, even a super alien intelligence, especially like because intelligence is such a funny term when people are like,
Yeah.
well, some discernible intelligence, when you're talking about animals or sea life or things like that, or the birds or anything, and to think about the type of intelligence, it would be it'd be so difficult for humans because humans try so hard to humanize everything around them. They try to
Right.
personify the personification of everything, and to try to believe that, and so it's a whole different experience to cast yourself out, and that's what a lot of the talk about, I think, the shape shifting and things like that have to do with, is that casting out their intelligence into other forms of intelligence that are around, going across the landscape and seeking it out and encountering it and interacting with it and coming back with some type of understanding. It's the very premise of it. Um, and having information that might be helpful, even, you know, finding solutions that way to common everyday problems. But yeah, I do think that it's just a type of. I'm not sure, I'm comfortable using the term intelligence to describe this. But I think that humans in general may mistake what it, as a generality, they may mistake exactly what that means. If it means to be more human, that's not the case. No.
Right.
But these things, just because they have this intelligence, it's not to say that they're like us.
Yeah. I mean, even just look at house cats. They do what they're gonna do. Um, for the most part, you can kind of teach them some things, or um, sometimes train them in certain ways, but there's a lot of other they're gonna do. So it makes me think of that, and
Absolutely.
that's just
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know that's just that's a domesticated creature that is still, there's a wild version of it, and but yeah. Um, moving on to the next point here. Uh, it says symbolic guardians and threshold beings, mythological gatekeepers. It goes through some here. Greek Cerberus, Egyptian Amet, Norse, Norse Graham, or not Graham, Garm. If I could read and then talk, that'd be good. Hindu river guardians, protecting transitions between realms appear consistently across cultures. Modern paranormal reports frequently describe sentinel-like entities guarding access to altered dimensions or restricted experiences. I think that could go for just places, um, just any kind of location that has a lot of significance, a physical location, let alone any kind of other level of consciousness, but just places that mean a lot to a lot of people. Um, I could see that there being those kinds of entities in those places, um, and those kinds of experiences. So so yeah, the guardians, or the gatekeepers, all that. Um, it's definitely, I think it's out there in terms of, uh, like I said, especially quote unquote haunted places may not be haunted. It's sacred, and if you go into a place with the wrong kind of attitude, or a disrespectful attitude, uh, you may have what you perceive to be a negative experience because of that. That sort of disregard for the history, or the energy that's there. Um, so that's where my mind is going with that. But transitions in general too. I mean, doorways, uh, windows, all these places, especially closets. There's so many reports of paranormal activity surrounding doorways, and then closets, and stairways. All these kinds of places that are transitions, and whether it's meant to be sort of a guardian of that passage or not, or it's just that's the energy somehow draws um, other beings to these places. I don't know, but there's just so many examples of that, of those kinds of places having paranormal activity surrounding them. So, what are your thoughts on that, Jen?
Yeah, I think that, it goes against the grain of the human ego that you can't just go anywhere you want to and do anything you want to when you go there. So I mean,
Right.
we have social standards within our own, um, within humanity. There's a certain protocol for how you operate, in different environments, and everyone understands those social aspects and, um, the appropriate way to handle certain situations and what's going to be expected because that's the world that we live in. But that's a whole nother, we could probably solve a lot of problems, maybe even in the psyche of humanity to some degree by having some more consideration about the concept that when you're out of your element, there should be a little bit more caution taken, even though,
Mhm.
it's still believed that, being bold and, taking risks is appropriate at certain times, but I think, there's always a lesson to be learned, and that's usually what comes of that. So I don't see, an issue with that, but I think that the idea of portals in certain spaces, it's not just, symbolic, but you've entered into some place that, may require a certain type of. I don't know if it's, like it depends on what you're, like what exactly what type of portal you would be talking about. I think if you're going
Right.
into the forest, obviously it's a completely different set of rules. And then but with the closet thing, I think it's interesting you mentioned, especially closets. And I was wondering what you were thinking about that. But we have to, I think, coming back to that because I don't know what it is in the psyche, but obviously it's just a very small space. Typically,
Hmm.
it's simply used for storage. It's typically, kept in the dark. I've always had this idea that there was something about places that stay in a home that stay kind of abandoned slightly, only used on
Yeah.
occasion, like attics, basements, closets, under the bed. Those always seem to be the places that these sorts of encounters occur, where people have some type of, especially children, have a sort of feeling if they're going into like a sort of unknown territory or going into a territory that is, unfamiliar because they don't spend most of their time there. But if they did, that'd be really odd, I suppose. But even accounts where people have made basements their bedrooms, there's still something about, and I don't know if it has to do with the ground or what, but it is really interesting that you mentioned closets, especially. But no, I think, just portal lore, as far as going in between two trees or going onto a different street or going down, it, it's constantly happening. So I mean, if you're looking at it from that perspective of when you go out into the world, I wouldn't say necessarily in your own home as a constant cosmic event, but there are certain events when you're doing something dramatically different than you usually do. It's not a typical course you're usually taking. Moments like that would probably stand out more, I think. When it's a new experience or something you know that you
And
haven't done yet. Yeah.
yeah, and I wonder too when it comes to like much larger homes where people may only use one part of like a handful of rooms in like in a mansion or something that they inherited or that their family owns, but they only live in one part of it. I wonder if it's those unused areas can be, and I think I've heard of this with like stadiums and arenas too. All kinds of people that are there when the places are empty have weird experiences there with
Yep.
hearing voices or hearing sounds, sensing presences there when there's no one there. I wonder if that's a similar thing, and it's because that those spaces that are empty, they could be drawing. There could be. I always wonder about this. How often are places that are empty just there are other consciousness, other spirits or souls or whatever that are looking for a place to stay in for a while, and they find one, and then they do that. Um, and then it may be a while or it may not be a while before someone encounters them, and there's this contact, and it was not originally planned, and that's where you get reports of haunted places, so to speak.
Possibly. like the spirit is saying, hey, taking a stand, like, I've given you all this space. Now this is actually where I'm going to stay, or something to that effect. I don't see why that couldn't be a possibility. Or even in a house where the house is, maybe, with a closet, if it was somebody else's room at some point, like, well, this is your room now. I guess I don't know how to think about that, but I mean, it could be possible that there's something like that going on, or that the energy is sort of stored there, or that there might be a type of, exactly what you're saying with the abandoned, larger homes. Like, I completely agree with that idea. And then the idea too that there could be something that, um, sort of habitates in the different light spectrums or something. I've always wondered that, because those places tend to be, sort of closed off. I've always felt more comfortable if I did have a closet when I was a, the door be open, or anything like that, just so if there was a light in there to have that turned on. It seemed to change the whole vibe of it. So,
Right.
because there
Yeah.
was no unknown with it at that point. I think the
Yeah.
dark, that's just some kind of primal feeling.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I've noticed too. I've heard so many accounts of people who say, I like to have my bedroom door closed, so that it feels like it's a safer space. It's all contained and everything. But then I've heard the opposite, where I have my bedroom door open because I want to be able to see what's out there. And it just depends on the person and their personality. And I wonder how often that happens with, cases where people have their homes, and they find their doors are, closed or opened when they had it a certain way, and it's all of a sudden changed. Is that because there's someone else there that has the opposite sort of preference when it comes to doors being open or closed?
Yeah, it's so funny because I have exactly what you're saying. Like, when I was growing up, I liked my door open. So I'd actually put a rock in front of my bedroom door to keep it open. Completely unnecessary, but I did. It's just like a doorstop that I had, literally. And it's so strange. So there must be some kind of something to it. But I've heard a lot of people too, they prefer to have the door completely closed, and that makes them feel safer. So I guess it just differs for different individuals. And I liked my closet door open. I like the bedroom
Right.
door open. Yeah, so I could see, and so that it's like, okay, the wider the space I can see, the better I feel. And the same thing, when I lived in Texas, it was very open. You could see as far as you wanted, and as there was nothing typically obscuring the view. It's just open view. However, where I live now, the trees encroach everywhere, so it's continuously like a this shroud of trees anywhere you look. I mean,
Yeah.
especially, or I mean, if you're out in the country, but if you're on the roads or the highways, of course, it's more open. But in general, houses are nestled around lots of trees and hills and things like that. So it's a completely different mindset, I think. There's something to that.
Yeah. Definitely. That may be a whole topic for another show. Just doors and passageways and all that. Stairways. There's something about stairways too to me. Staircases. That we may have to touch on that another time. A whole different show on that. Um, but because we have other things here to still have, let me see, 3 more points to move on to here. But yeah, I think that'd be a good show to do at some point. Is just a show on those kind of spaces, those thresholds, um, and those transition points, because I have experiences with those as well. So, but moving on to the next point here, uh, superhuman strength and transgressive abilities. Mythological heroes and divine beings possess superhuman strength. Hercules, Samson, and others. While modern paranormal possession cases similarly report sudden manifestations of extraordinary strength, linguistic knowledge unknown to the possessed individual, and revelation of hidden information. There's not only that, but there's cases of massive objects like bookshelves and things being moved by invisible forces, across rooms, or furniture being pushed across rooms, in places. So, and again, it's not superhuman that's necessarily for a full-grown adult person to be able to move furniture around, even though furniture can be really heavy. But if you think about that, how is someone that supposedly does not have any physical strength still manage to move things like bookshelves and chairs and tables around? And this is not it's not a super rare thing. There are cases of this solid objects being moved around. So yeah, it's fascinating to me that sort of thing happens when, again, supposedly, there's these souls or spirits or other entities that do not are not purely in the physical realm, can still have physical effects on things, and massive things as well.
Yeah.
So I don't
Um,
know.
I I guess if they're not, if these powers are not limited by any type of laws of, any type of natural law as we would think of it in the physical form. So these powers, if they were to get into a person, if a person was to invoke them or somehow I guess, access them in themselves, that they'd be able to do that. I think that there's a lot lending. You've heard of, like when people are moved by a lot of adrenaline, or when they have an impossible situation that they must do something about,
Right.
and they do things that just seem like they were impossible to do. So they're able to access some part of where, I guess, the laws of nature don't necessarily think about them. Even sometimes where they actually experience some type of, injury, and there are cases where they don't as well. I've heard of, cases where people exhibit these sort of almost supernatural ability of strength or of will, and don't there's not even any type of physical sign that there was such a strain put up on their body. For example, moving vehicles, lifting
Right.
vehicles up above people, and things like that. But I guess it has something to do with that there must be powers at play that we're no longer aware of or willing to accept or something. Is what so it makes sense that it needs to be looked at a
Yeah.
lot more, and we just don't take enough time to think about it. But I'm sure they're aware of it, in the sciences to some extent.
Right.
I suppose because it has happened.
Yeah. I would think some kind of energy transfer from outside of the body inside, and maybe even to the space around it, to have effects on things like that, move cars and things like that. That would make sense to me in a way. Because yeah, I've heard of that as well. My I have a little, not a life and death story, but still be it would have been a bad thing. My my dad was helping move stuff around my apartment for me, and one day he decided to do something on his own, which I wish he wouldn't have, but he decided to do it, and he wanted to move this one cabinet from one place in the room to another, and he didn't know, because I didn't know, that this cabinet had the top half was not totally attached, or it could come off of the bottom half of this kind of like China cabinet hutch, and he was moving it, and the top part started to slide off, and he caught it and put it back on again, but he doesn't know how he did it, except he was saying he um, he knew that if it fell, it had glass doors on the top of it, or in the front of it on the top part, and he knew that if that whole thing fell, it'd be a huge mess. And because I can't see glass when it's like that, really hardly at all, unless it's in a solid piece, I could have hurt myself if any had been left behind. And so he doesn't even know how, managed to put it back on, attach it back to the bottom of the shelf, and and he did have a bruise on his arm from catching it. But yeah, so just an example of a parent knowing that if they didn't stop what was happening, I guess some kind of a even though it would have been later, but not right away, it still could have hurt me. And just somehow knowing that gave him the strength, or something gave him the strength, or someone gave him the strength, I don't know, to make sure that didn't happen.
It's like he didn't even think about it. He just didn't want the glass to break, didn't want it to fall. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's such a good example, though. Like where he didn't even it was just something he did it quickly. He didn't even think about it. That's funny because that's a lot of the accounts too. When there's like an accident going on or a moment where somebody must act, and if somebody doesn't act, something terrible is going to happen. They don't think. They don't.
yeah,
A lot of times when people do heroic things or things like that, they don't think. They just go. That's how people survive impossible situations and things like that, or saved. So so but even something like that, just it's starting to shift, and out of nowhere, unexpectedly, that he had it. Yeah, that's exactly like that.
yeah. So I think that's the only example I know of personally, but I mean that's it's a I don't keep glass cups or a lot of cookware around just for that reason, because I know if I drop it, there's a good chance I won't be able to find everything, or if I do, I'll end up cutting myself in the process. So, and he was aware of that. So, yeah, think of that just. But yeah, let me see here. So moving on to the next point here. This one says interdimensional communication and language barriers. Ancient myths frequently document gods or otherworldly beings communicating across dimensional boundaries, sometimes in unknown languages or through symbols. Modern paranormal cases, especially possession, again, it mentions that again, um, report speaking in tongues, automatic writing, and non human forms of communication. Um, and there is that I've heard of in some rare cases with um, people who have encounters, whether it's abductions or even just dreams that involve like astral travel with dreams with where they encounter other beings. Sometimes it's not even a being, the sense of a presence, and then they'll see certain symbols in their mind's eye or projected on a wall or a light in the shape of a pattern. I've heard of that before too. So I find that really fascinating. I haven't had that experience myself, but yeah. So the interdimensional communication thing, I do think I've had that with I'm not sure who or what they were, but here and there I've had that. And I wonder about a lot of my sort of alternate reality, uh, parallel universe dreams, if they're happening because of someone else sort of having them happen, or some other part of me making them happen. I'm not sure, but yeah. So, and I do think whenever there's contact with someone that's not just a relative of someone that has passed away, that appears to be coming back. Whenever there's some other kind of being there, and there's either telepathic communication or things like that, that is kind of in a way a different language. It's telepathic. It's not even, people report things. There's cases where the telepathic communication is not even in words. It's just in images or thoughts, images or feelings or sounds or symbols, all these kinds of things as well. So yeah, that's that bullet point there.
I think for a lot of people throughout history, the goal has been to be able to communicate this way, to be able to access information like that, to be able to um, use to overcome things like language limitation, or different types of in literature and writing and symbols, to communicate beyond that big limitation as far as communication in the around us. So there are a lot of people who have made that intentionally the goal, to be able to go beyond that and be able to sense beyond that at a cyclical level. And that was the intention. And that has been something that has been very controversial for the B world, that they don't want that. That's why they have limited, I mean, that's what I think, but they have intentionally limited it so that they control it better, so they control the masses better. And statements like, it's really interesting, but like possession, that one of the traits is being able to have knowledge of languages that you shouldn't know. But that could be interfaced in multiple ways of knowing things, seeing the true threat to the power structure. So it's something to consider as far as there's a lot of manipulation around that in the mind of the masses. And they've done a good job with that, with terrorizing through that mechanism. And it's true that unharnessed, psychic energy or cyclical energy could be dangerous. And that's something that humans have a right to find out, I think, to some extent, but also with a great deal of caution. And that's why they had all these initiations and things like that, and there was all this caution involved. So we didn't have it wasn't witch talk. There was a process. There wasn't an aesthetic. There was a purpose to it. It's become kind of washed down into a style and an aesthetic and sort of like bands you like to listen to. And there's a big difference about it, I think. But they've created a lot of fear around that idea. But I think that in civilizations and with people throughout history, and in general, even currently now, that their aspiration is, I think a lot of people, their aspiration is to go beyond that and be able to, feel and sense, beyond just having to be told, to be more emphatic. And I think that, naturally it could be created, especially in the generations coming up, that empathy could become something more impactful for them. Because if you could take the amount of energy that they're putting into their own inner world and apply that to the outer world, that would be a very powerful thing. Because in the society that we're raising now, in these generations that are coming up, all of their focus is very internalized. So if they were just to simply switch that the other direction, there's no telling what sort of untapped power there is in that.
Yeah, it makes me think of how, and this is something that comes up every so often, because a lot is anything anomalous or paranormal. It's okay as long as it's fiction, but it can't be real. There's a lot of resistance to all those things being real, unless it's all evil. It's through popular culture, unless it's all negative, and even then, that still gets laughed at, and there's a lot of stigma against all that. When it comes to anything, whether it's ghost or, of course, it's everything is demons. That whole concept, or it's all negative or it's all positive. But there's just so much. There's so much that is about all these things, but it's supposed to be fiction. We're supposed to think that it's all made up, when so much from fiction has a basis on something that has happened before somewhere to somebody, if not more than one case. I mean, I think when people come up with these things for fictional movies or books or TV shows, they've been looking into something on these topics and reports of it, whether they believe it or not. They've been looking into sort of the history of all these things that were said to have happened. And again, I think that a lot of the stuff does, but that's just my own experience. But yeah, I think it's somewhat focuses on people in their own space, watching their own screens, their own movies, TV shows, reading books, but on their devices, and just focused again on themselves, having this experience on their own, and not so much. I mean, yes, paranormal tourism is a thing, but it's still it's a relatively, as far as I know, it's not taking the world by storm. It's not a huge part of the economy at this point. It's very much its own uh, sort of category of experiences people have, but not everybody is into it, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I think that's true. Yeah. I can see that.
but we have one more bullet point here, um, and this one is physical or corporeal hybrid entities. Mythological hybrids, Greek minotaur, Symphalian birds with metallic parts, other creatures, mermaids, kind human and non-human characteristics. Modern paranormal accounts similarly describe beings that appear partially humanoid with non-organic or animalistic components, suggesting a universal conceptual framework for encountering otherness. And then that one is fascinating. Oh, you know what? We have one more point after all. Anyway, I hadn't scrolled down all the way, but that's a huge one there in and of itself because I've heard of humanoid sightings, people seeing things that look almost human, but they have, let's say, I mean, obviously there's the whole winged humanoid phenomenon. Uh, there's the whole not deer phenomenon, which is deer-like creatures, almost kind of, that have sometimes, in some cases, human facial features. I mean, there's just so many things. Of course, Bigfoot or Sasquatch, the different versions of that supposedly have more humanoid or human-like facial features. Just so many things. Mermaids is another topic there, but there's just so many places to go with that one alone. And this is, I mean, we don't know if all these figures are physical or not. A lot of times because in so many cases they appear and or they disappear without anyone being able to track them. So this is a whole probably whole set of categories of different types of entities that one bullet point is talking about there, which is always fascinating to me. The whole human but not quite human thing as well. I know. Same with you, Jen, as well too.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think just what does it mean for us if you come across presenting itself and it looks, sort of, either bipedal or there's a human-like appearance to it, or in some cases people describe that there's a type of intelligence in the eyes of the creature that they're encountering, where it seemed more or it acted, beyond just, I don't know. I think that there's a good possibility that at some point, and they've talked about it, and we've heard about with the Neanderthal and how are you going to say Neanderthal, but that these different hominids at one point there were, an operation in the world, and then being kind of pushed out. And in many many cultures, they describe um, these. Well, there's the Naga, the giant serpent with the upper torso, sometimes just the face or the arms. Sometimes they have no arms. It varies, but they have sort of that they were the progenitor of humanity in some regard, or that we came from even the case of these aquatic life forms that appear to be half human, like with the merfolk concept. But even in the forest, in the concepts of like the Lord of the Wild, that it's the braided version of some level of humanity at its roots that we learned from that. So a progenitor of humanity sort of concept that we've sort of become more, that we think that we've you know the teacher, the students are passing the teacher type of concept, or humanity got a type of arrogance about it, or something, when it was what taught humanity everything. So I don't know, but the
Mhm.
encounters people have with these sort of the intelligences of all these different realms of nature and different realms of certain types of wildlife that have a sort of sensitivity that is something, especially these are all creatures humans have had a lot of contact with in a lot of sense. So, like in the oceans, or in the case of the deer you're mentioning, or in the forests with like the werewolf or dogman,
Mhm.
however people say different things, but that they were having a lot of contact with those environments, and they encountered something that reminded them of um, they saw humanity, sort of projected into that environment when it's the other way around, is what it
Right.
kind of sounds like.
Yeah, and that I wonder too about the and some of the more modern experiences where people see what appear to be uh, figures, human-shaped figures made of static, almost like static light, but it's like in a static kind of form. I wonder what that is, and if that has anything to do with again um, more of a not humanity that's presenting in a certain way, but still takes on that shape. I wonder what those are as well, because those to me are fascinating. Because it's almost like it's a I don't know if it's some version of an other life form that's how they naturally appear, or is there are there other entities that have seen that kind of like staticky appearance on TV screens way back when and have copied that? I'm always curious about that as well. Or the cases where people see just a rectangle, just a rectangular frame of that kind of light, that move. I'm always really fascinated by that. Like, is that going to become more common in the future? Is one of the things I wonder in relation to technology and all that. Because technology is also something that is there's more and more interaction it seems with other beings and technology making it do different things and affecting it in different ways as well.
Yeah, it reminds
So,
me of an experience that I had at one
mhm.
point we were with a group and doing a Ouija board session, and it was we were just it was one of the many sessions that we were doing, and there was in this one case the contact that was made. It was referring to um, we were asking, where are you in the space? Like, where are you at? And it said that it was in the television, and the television was on, just the blank kind of, not a static screen, just sort of that, even not a home screen. This was, so it was just like this kind of blue, like the before, like HDMI. It was like
Right.
HDMI choice screen, and it was just on in the living room through the window. And this was being done on the porch because we'd stopped doing it in the house. But we all kind of looked through the window at the television, and we were like, "Why the television?" Like, dude, why would you
Right.
be near the television? And it's said because everyone's always looking at it.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
it was really
That's
bizarre.
fascinating.
It
It
was.
is, and I'll never forget the experience I had with technology where this one night, middle of the night, I got this feeling like I needed to turn off my computer and my internet, my modem or whatever you want to call it, because something coming and it was coming through the wires in the walls and everything to that, and it was going to come through that to my computer. And I don't know how I knew this. I just knew it, sensed it. And at first, I figured that's my imagination. That sounds too wild. But the thought would not go away. So I did. I turned everything off. And as soon as I did that and I laid down, because I figured I might as well go to bed, I got the sense of this presence that was coming through, and it was angry that I had turned everything off. And eventually it went away. And so I fell asleep, and then the next day got up turn everything on. And but there was something that was coming for whatever reason through the wires, through the electricity, through the power cables and all that, and it was coming
Wow.
here. And I don't know why or how, but it was. So
That's a whole thing to itself. The electricity, or the power grid source. I think that's something we could go into at some point, because it is really fascinating. And there's actually, the symbology of electricity or high voltage symbology there, occult, and then you have, of course, the powers of the lightning and things like that, and just to that, and how that affects the environment. That's unwielded, like uncontrolled. But in the concept with electricity and
right.
power like that, it's been bent and yielded to certain purposes. But that's really fascinating. And there have been concepts done in books and popular fiction about this, that are, I don't know, it's just really, really interesting to think about the idea of electricity. I think that's a really, really fascinating idea. Always something
Yeah,
significant
we
to
can
it.
definitely. Yeah, yeah, we can definitely do that sometime too. I think we just found ourselves two more show topics to go forward with. Um, but so I have one more bullet point here, and then that'll probably do it. And this says moral and ethical frameworks governing interactions. Mythologies universally establish rules, taboos, and consequences for human divine interaction. Not eating fairy food, not looking at gods directly, respect hospitality customs. Modern paranormal accounts similarly describe non-human entities with explicit rules, protocols, and consequences for violation of established boundaries. And of course, that makes me think of the whole example of people leaving things for other things, sort of appease them or placate them or keep them on the goods on basically happy with the people. We've talked about that before as well, I think, in other shows. But and then just yeah, what can happen if you don't do the right thing, or if you forget. Um, I've heard of, even in cases of Bigfoot or Sasquatch encounters, people that leave things out for them. If they stop, then that can anger or upset the beings, the creatures, and they can come by and say, "Hey, what's going on?" and make a lot of extra noise and get closer to your home than you may want them to. So we have lots of examples of that too, and even with people leaving radios or TVs on to sort of, because it seems like when they do that, there's less paranormal activity. I've heard of that over the years in more than a few cases, and then again leaving water or milk out or snacks out, and then finding them, gone the next day, and then doing it over and over again just to keep the peace in a way. So, and I know you've looked into a lot more of the fairy and fae stuff than I have, Jen. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too.
Well, it reminded me of something. There was an anthropologist. I can't remember the name of it, just spur of the moment or anything, but I think he was just a student or at the time, and I can't remember his name, but he had went down to, I think it was Bali, or it was some location like that. If I think it was, I think he said Bali. And he was down there staying with sort of a host family. And in the morning, one morning, because he was staying out in this sort of separate house on this family compound, like this little hut of sorts, or like a little structure. And his host, or one of the children of the host, was coming around and had come out to hit where he was and had given him like a bowl of fruit, and she had it on this tray. And on the tray, there were also these little dishes, very small little woven sort of like very small woven dishes that had bits of rice. And he went. There were several of them, and he watched in the following, and would go out and put them at certain corners of the different buildings, things like that. These just at the corners on the ground. And he eventually went out and looked, and well, he asked her about it. And she said that it was for the spirits that were there around the structures, and just it's something that they did as a sort of, just it was just a normal to do. And one morning, he went down to where these baskets were, and he looked, and he thought he noticed one of the little pieces of rice sort of moving, and there was a trail of ants that were there approaching the dish and were taking little pieces of this rice that they were offering up every morning. And he mentioned that region has these massive cliffs of ant population could easily in that sort of environment overtake the entire property and become quite a nuisance. But it seemed that by offering those little dishes around the structures, it kept them occupied, and they didn't take over the households or the outbuildings because
Right.
they were being given an offering.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yep. And I mean, again, that goes back to they're part of nature, but they're also their presence. They're their own thing. And
Yeah,
if that those offerings weren't, I mean, who knows?
they
What could
kind
have
of
happened?
create a
Something
boundary of
did start to
sorts.
happen. Yeah, and maybe there were
Yeah.
issues at the very beginning at some point in time, and the people figured out or found out that leaving those offerings there um, made things better.
Sort of appeased
So
them. Yep,
yeah, that's fascinating.
it
There
was.
was a true story I found online a couple of years ago of this person when they were visit, and at the friend's house, their friend with I think it was like Kool-Aid and like some snack out every night and the TV on every night, and the so and the person didn't know why they did that, but apparently the place was haunted, and but if that, then there wouldn't be as much going on. And so they went to bed, and this person woke up in the middle of the night and was annoyed that the TV was on and turned it off. And apparently, I forget now what happened, but there was some kind of activity that happened and some kind of apparition or something like that. And the um, the family, the next morning was like, "Oh, the TV's off. That's we're not supposed to do that," and turn it back on again. And so it's really fascinating that all these things are said to happen. So, but yeah, that's it for that list there. We may have to do some more, revisit some more mythology at some other point in time. Just more specific mythologies and there. But I think for now, this is a good place to end that. But this has been a lot of fun because it is amazing how many parallels there are between myth and again, who knows how much of that mythology is based on something. I always wonder about that, based on some kind of experience at some point, and then modern paranormals that still happen today. So this has been a lot of fun going over that and the connections. And I mean, now we have two ideas for two different shows that came out of this. I think they'll be good shows to do. The whole stairway and or doors or closets. That whole subject, and then electricity. The not just lightning because we've done that before, but just the modern electrical systems and interactions between other beings and those systems.
Yep, I love when that happens. It doesn't always happen, but it happens sometimes where we get ideas from, what we're talking about, and it seems like a natural continuance, and I always enjoy that. And also really talking with you this evening about all of that, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for being here as always. And next week we'll get back to experiences and go from there. But yeah, thank you, Jen. Have a good night, and I'll talk to you again soon.
To you then.
Yep. So, and that will do it for the show tonight. Um, like I said, we'll get back next Saturday to do another experience show. I'll be back on Monday. As far as my own shows go, Monday night, late Monday night, early Tuesday morning, to do a couple of short experiences shows on my own, and we'll go from there. And thank you all for listening, and I will talk to you all next time on Salsido Paranormal. Take care.